Good morning. This is Daybreak, and thank you for staying with us. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. With me this morning in studio on my immediate right, Angel Mbudia. She is the chair of the Jubilee Party Youth League. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayub.
Thanks for finding time for the broadcast. Kidi Mwaga, sandwiched between the two ladies, is the convener of the Interparties Youth Forum. He is as well a lawyer by profession. Good morning.
Good morning, Ayub.
Thanks for your time. And Sajni Malde is a senior data scientist with the World Data Lab, who had interesting numbers in relation to young people in Kenya and across the continent. Gentlemen and ladies, thank you for your time. Much appreciated. Before we begin to look at the numbers and some of the challenges facing the young people in the country, here is a story prepared by our business desk in relation to the employment clock in relation to the young people in Kenya and across the continent. And this is a story that sets up our discussion this morning.
The platform seeks to offer detailed data on youth population and employment rate. The data are now showing that Kenya's youth population aged between 15 and 35 years is highly employed in the informal sector and the service sector. As of 2023, out of 11.6 million young working Kenyans, only 11%, an equivalent of 1.3 million, were employed in the formal sector, while 89% were in the informal sector, representing 10.4 million youth, out of which 52% or 6 million were in the service sector.
The number of those who have a job often don't have a good job, and 90% are informal. To some extent, in many African countries, informal is normal. Maybe some of the informal parts also want to escape the tax system. So there may be some opportunity to add there. But still, that's the key question of how can you convert the hustler jobs, or how can a hustler become maybe not a banker, but at least something in between.
We have these narratives usually, but the data to back it up is not usually there. And so for me, where I see the opportunity is in us getting high growth firms that are generating formal quality jobs for our young people.
The data also reveals that agriculture continues to lose popularity among the youthful population, a situation that experts believe will only get worse. On the flip side, however, construction jobs are set to gain momentum in the country, with more than 500,000 youth expected to be working in construction by 2030.
This is information that can be able to guide, even when you're coming up with youth programs, youth activities, and also even when you're coming up with policies when it comes to employment. One thing I know, this information should be able to even inform our young people what are the sectors that they should be looking at when they're looking for employment.
At the same time, the government has been urged to lower internet prices to unlock more opportunities in the digital economy, with experts noting that this could be the silver bullet to ending unemployment in the country.
As the world evolves, it is data such as this that is expected to shape the future of the workplace and the policy required. Jimmy Mbogo, Citizen TV, Nairobi.
I begin with you first, Sajni. And we expect in the next 6 years the young population to grow by about to 22.7 million. That we are now talking about 19.5. That's in under 6 years' time. But is this speed commensurate with the available policies and how to cater for these rapidly growing numbers of young Kenyans?
Yeah, definitely. And I'm guessing my colleagues will be able to speak more about the policy. But if we look at Africa as a whole, right now, this is the decade where we see the highest ever youth population growth. This decade, we're going to bring in 132 million youth people into the world, whereas in the rest of the world, it's going to be a less of a youth population by 56 million. So this is really the decade for us Africans to really shine and show and bring in the youth to the world.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Kidi, coming to you, given that we'll be talking about the challenges, because if you look at the top 3 challenges pointed out by that study, corruption, restrictive family expectations, lack of political and social connections, and in a setup where largely connections matter than competency.
Yes.
I mean, when you look at the numbers,
yes,
should this be keeping the policymakers awake?
It should and it must, because if you look at societies that are able to bring to meaningful success, is that what you see is that we have a civil, a civil service that is has people that are competent. And competence is that you have a bureaucracy that is able to make sure that only people who are competent are given a chance to handle affairs of the state. If you look at the question, one of the most significant roles of government is regulation. But you cannot have government being able to discharge that role of regulation when it is full of people who may not know what they should do and when they should do it. Today, we are speaking about the question of fake fertilizer being in the market. I think that is something that should cause us all to worry, because the question begins at what happens with the ministry? What has the minister done to curb this? And if the minister was caught unaware, it therefore means that he didn't have create a collaborative working environment that would have helped them discover this on time. It goes to the question of our security and law enforcement agencies, that how did they fail to disrupt this long before it happened? So yes, as we go back to question of competence, is that our policymakers must now make deliberate effort to make sure that we have a civil service and other sectors of the state that are with people that are able to understand that which they need to do and must be done. Thank you.
Angel, is it not concerning that, as per this study, that young people are no longer interested in sectors like the agriculture sector? And I mean, there's more focus on white-collar job and starting their own startups. But this is the biggest employer, and it's the biggest contributor to our GDP growth. But young Kenyans seem to be turning away from it, or even they're dead against it. I mean, how can this be part and parcel of the drive towards ensuring that there's a soft landing spot in terms of absorbing them and making agriculture the attractive site where they can be, whether they can get a gainful employment?
Yes, I see where you're coming from, but again, the drivers of what the youth are interested in are majorly going to be focused on the laws of demand and supply. If they do not have the land, if they do not have the capital that is necessary for the production of maybe agricultural products, is something that young people do not see that as something that is feasible. Because, for example, if from where I sit, I need to start a poultry farm or need to start a poultry business, that means I need a poultry farm. I need to know where I'm going to get feeds for the chicks. I need to have an incubator, and all that is capital intensive. So what we are looking at as a nation is that young people are passing a vote of no confidence to the government of the day. We are looking at a government that tells you, please apply for the opportunities that we have, but once they publish the names of the people that they have employed, you only see the names coming from one community. Yes, I am a Kikuyu, but even if they were coming from the Kikuyu nation, it would not make things right. When we look at first world countries, first world nations have elected people they did not think they would ever elect into their governance in their governance space. When we saw Obama being elected as the first black president after the black people have lived in America for over 200 years, it's not because it's a nice thing to do, but because they have seen these same mistakes they made when they were 50 years, like Kenya is 50 years today. They made them and they did not work for them. So they realized that if we don't embrace meritocracy in our country, then we are going to head nowhere. And this is exactly what we are seeing with Kenya today.
And Sajini, coming to yes, you have please proceed. Yes.
Yeah, just going back to your question around agriculture jobs declining. I think this is highlighting the structural transformation that Kenya and Africa as a whole is going through at the moment. We're seeing a decline in agriculture jobs, but an equally large increase in services and industry. And this is what we were highlighting before around how manufacturing jobs and construction jobs are coming up increasingly.
But Kiri, is it not then an irony and to just pick out the dichotomy here, because there seems to be less interest in agriculture, but the continent has half of the world's arable land, yet we are talking about food insecurity affecting the African people. I mean, then this falls, is it, on the doorstep of the policymakers that something needs to be done and to be fixed immediately?
That is a very fair question, Ayub, because you realize that today we speak about declining agriculture jobs while rising creative economy and service sector. What this does, therefore, it places the country and the continent in this precarious position where we've got declining food production. Yeah. We are having increasingly disrupted food systems. And what this does, as the food systems are getting broken, the population keeps rising. You remember when this administration came into office, the price of unga was a cause of concern for this country. We almost caused the unga revolution. Yeah. Because of investment in agriculture, we saw farmers having what I would call a bumper harvest, and that reduced pressure on the prices of flour and some other basic commodities. But I think there is still so much work to be done. Work to be done here is that while we have been traditionally conditioned, but the African youth, the Kenyan youth, that we should look for white-collar jobs, we are abandoning sectors that would see us lift so many out of poverty. When we make proper investment in agriculture, when we make sure that and part of that investment is the value chain, we invest in the value chain, I think that agriculture sector still remains one of the areas that have got capacity to lift this country out of poverty and put us firmly in the path of progress. Mm-hmm. Thank you. And
coming to you, Angel, then, because if you look at that study by the African Social and Convergence Research and MasterCard Foundation, the aspirations and the resilience of the African young population, and you look at the study and the data from the respondents, and they seem to be more focused on now establishing their own businesses and startups than white-collar jobs. It tells you a lot about now the shift in terms of the mindset from dependency on ever-shrinking public sector to starting their own businesses. But then the question is, how can they achieve that? Is the capital there? Is the political goodwill there, especially in our context as Kenya's young population?
First of all, I'm quite excited to read that young people are more interested in starting their own initiatives. And first of all, we can recognize that we are now in the 4th industrial revolution, and we're embracing the Internet of Things, and that's something that the young people have warmly welcomed. And I'd like to applaud young people for their resilience and resolve to make this country a better place. And that alone is enough for everything to kick off. So what I see, and when we talk about the Hustler Fund, we talk about the Youth Fund, and we see that those funds are not being channeled properly to align to the right sectors is quite displeasing. And even when you look at the report, you see that young people are more interested in services like the beauty and the fashion. And these are some of the things that young people should need to be exposed to. So when we talk about young people being interested in these facets of starting their own business, but then we're seeing more taxes, and we really had a very strong campaign with the BBI talking about having tax holidays. And these are some of the incentives that young people need to be given. If your organization is started by a youth, led by a youth, and constitutes about 60% of youth, should get tax reliefs in this nation. I think when you talk about the cost of doing business in Kenya is quite high right now. When you talk about electricity, when you talk about even the licenses that you need to acquire to start a business, is something that we need to relook as a nation.
And Sajini, when you talk about manufacturing in the context of your earlier submission, are there specific issues that the young people pointed out? Because a good manufacturing space then means that there are going to be lots of job employment opportunities for young Kenyans in terms of their absorption. But have they specified, and are there challenges that you have realized or established in this study which affects young people in relation to manufacturing?
Not directly in relation to manufacturing, but they are. There's manufacturing, construction coming up, but there's also jobs, like she was mentioning, around digital economy and the transport, storage, and communication sector, which includes the IT, is also coming up. So as we're growing as a nation, we're like trying to train our people more into construction. We're tailoring TVETs, etc., into more of these construction industries, and then also we're making us more employable into the international labor market, so that we can use our skills to close the gaps in the international market. Mm-hmm.
And Kidi, also when you look at that study, it tells about, it talks about the aspiration of young Kenyans to migrate and take advantage of opportunities and then return to their country to pursue what they have chosen to do. what risk does this pose on the domestic market, for example, in the event that we have this sort of the young people who are migrating out of the country looking for better opportunities? Yes. What is the risks that this poses to the domestic market in terms of economic growth?
The most significant, most important resource we have as a country is our human resource. And remember that this country has invested hundreds of millions of shillings in training its citizens. And so I think that we are therefore not getting value for money when after training some of the finest, and remember our education system, for all the problems it has, still remains one of the finest, one of the strongest in the region. So after producing this workforce and then we let it go out there, it takes us back to what we used to hear when we were in school called brain drain. So, because I think that we are taking our most talented, our most skilled out there, building other economies while they could be doing so much work here at home. For instance, I am told that the London public transport system was revitalized by a Kenyan who was working there and had an opportunity to work with the government of Britain. I think that such individuals, if they had a chance to be here, they had a chance to help, say, the city county government to fix the traffic menace we are seeing, to fix the drainage that we are seeing in Nairobi, I think that way it would place Kenya in a firmer footing of prosperity than when we rely only on remittances that these Kenyans send back on. And I think to train our populations, our young people, and ask them to go out there and only rely on remittance, I think for me that is a bit to miss the point by the river. Thank you.
But then, Angel, isn't it then challenging because you look at our space and not ready for absorption, then when they look for opportunities outside, then you have that brain drain problem. How can these 2 points which are conflicting be reconciled?
Well, Ayub, I would really agree with my colleague Kidi here, but then I think and imagine that when we talk about affordable housing in Kenya, who are the ones leading that affordable housing, those affordable housing projects across the country? Is the government ready and willing to take the best in the market and pay them the right way to be able to lead those kinds of projects? Those are the kind of questions that I think we need to ask better. Because when you look at the opportunities that are outside the country and are better compared to what is here at home, I think I would not fault anyone if they made that decision to go abroad. And what we've seen in other places, I don't see it as much as a threat. I think we can always share the human resource that we have. I think Kenya has one of the best in the world. And then when I look at countries like Ghana, that have had the history of the transatlantic slave trade. So they have a lot of ties in the US, the Americas, and Europe. So Ghana had an initiative to have the year of the return, where they were asking Africans of Ghanaian descent to come back home, and they gave them numerous opportunities. They asked them to register and apply for lands and buy land at affordable prices. And I mean, they changed their policies a bit so that they're able to accommodate them. And that really boosted the Ghanaian economy when Americans, Europeans, and so on and so forth from Jamaica came into to Ghana and boosted their currency for about 1 year before they had the economic decline, that is. So this is an opportunity in disguise. I think there's more that we can offer to the rest of the world. Young people should not just limit themselves here. I think we've seen young people even doing exams for Americans. And we had that story, and it was quite intriguing. That and they're even scoring A's in the exams. And we have a lot of good brains here, and we need to make use of them. So we need to keep fighting for our country, because again, we do not have to go abroad seeking where the grass is greener, but let us water our grass here and make it greener. Yeah,
and Sajini, according to that data, 52% of employed Kenyan youth work in services. And that was very, very specific, as you pointed out. 89% of the jobs created for the youth between 2020 and 2023 were equally in services. But are these service jobs then quality? Can they sustain the livelihoods of young Kenyans in an era where it seems that everything is above the roof when you talk about the cost of living and the other needs that they must meet?
Yeah, no, this is an interesting point. Within the services sector, there includes everything from the mama bogas on the street to data consultants, for example. And there is a large proportion of this that are in the higher quality jobs, but there is still the need for us to address the ones that are in the lower quality jobs. We, as Kenyans, have a really high, like 80% of our youth have attained at least secondary education levels compared to 40% in Africa. So this is a really high number if we think about this continent. And as you see, if you see the numbers, the more educated you are, the more likely you are to work in services sector. And this is really like pushing us towards this transformation that I was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. And how about the gender in that regard, in terms of the provision of the services? Who was more? Who was less, and what were the differences in terms of the numbers? Yeah,
so the services sector is more female-dominated as a whole, but if you look at the subsectors within the services sector, you see the more precarious jobs are often by women, whereas the more like steadier jobs like transport, those are more by men. And so there is that gender imbalance as well within those sectors.
Mm-hmm. And Kidi, when we talk about the shares of youth not in education, employment, or training, that is NEET, this across the region, in the African region, with 15% of 2.9 million young Kenyans not in education, employment, or training, compared to 25% for Africa as a whole. Our number seems to be taking up some percentage of that total African number, that is according to the data provided by Sajini Malda and her organization. This seems to be also a problematic area, is it? That something must be done about this 2.9 million Kenyans who are not in education, either employment or training, and have nothing meaningful or useful to accomplish.
I think 2024 going forward must be the season of action and not symbols and signs. I say symbols and signs because all along we have been told of leaving no one behind. But truth is, so many families, so many young people have been left out and left behind. When you talk about education, we have not, there are so many young people that say after high school that do not transition to high school, from primary to high school. We have not made sufficient investment to reach out to such young people and give them a hand up in life. After high school, far much more young people again drop out, and government has attempted to make efforts like the KYOP to give them a hand up. But the question is that enough? There are a lot of young people that do not graduate from colleges. So many young people get to college, but then because of circumstances of life, they fail to the matriculation. They fail to transition from students into graduate successfully and get into the job market. So I think this is an area that still requires a concerted, intelligent effort by stakeholders, including but not limited to government, so that we ensure that when we speak about Africa Rising, when we speak about giving opportunity to young people, then we ensure that there is that one Kenyan left out is one Kenyan too many. Thank you.
Okay, and when we get back from the break here on the broadcast, ladies and gentlemen, we'll also talk about the challenges, because they point out corruption, restrictive family expectations, lack of political and social connections, and why young people no longer see marriage as a desirable concept. We'll be talking about that. The hashtag on X is Daybreak. The SMS code is 22422 at Citizen TV Kenya and at Ayub Abdikadir. We are back with more after the break. Stay tuned.